The morning sun crested the mesa like a blade, cutting through amber, casting long shadows across the alkali flats where nothing moved except the wind and the occasional tumble of sagebrush. Marcus Hartwell rode his sorrel gelding at a steady walk, the leather of his saddle creaking with each step, his weathered hands loose on the reins. He had been riding for 3 days straight, following a trail that seemed to lead nowhere, carrying water that was running low and provisions that wouldn't last another week. The silence out here was absolute, broken only by the distant cry of a red-tailed hawk circling high above the canyon walls. Marcus preferred it this way, alone, unburdened by conversation or the weight of other people's expectations. He had learned long ago that solitude was safer than company, that the desert asked nothing of a man except that he respect its harsh indifference. At 42, Marcus carried the kind of quiet that came from seeing too much and saying too little. His face was carved by wind and sun into something that might have been handsome once, before the war had taken the softness from his features and replaced it with the hard lines of a man who had buried too many friends. His eyes, the color of winter sky, held secrets he had never shared with another living soul. But then he heard it, a sound so faint it might have been his imagination, a whimper carried on the wind like the ghost of something small and hurt. He pulled up short, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle scabbard at his knee. The sound came again, clearer this time, and unmistakably human. Marcus dismounted, ground-tying his horse with practiced ease, and followed the sound toward a cluster of red rocks that jutted from the desert floor like broken teeth. The crying grew louder as he approached, and when he rounded the largest boulder, he found the source. A small child sat huddled in the meager shade, no more than 7 or 8 years old, with skin the color of burnished copper and long black hair that hung in tangled strands around a face streaked with tears and dust. The child wore nothing but a torn piece of cloth wrapped around the waist, and Marcus could see the angry red welts across the small back where someone had used a switch or a belt with deliberate cruelty. The child looked up at him with eyes that were too old for such a young face, eyes that had seen things no child should ever witness. There was fear there, but also a kind of resigned acceptance that made Marcus's chest tighten with something he couldn't name. "Easy there, little one," Marcus said softly, crouching down to make himself less threatening. His voice was rusty from disuse, roughened by dust and solitude. "I'm not going to hurt you." The child said nothing, just watched him with those dark, knowing eyes. Marcus could see the dehydration in the cracked lips, the way the small chest rose and fell with shallow, labored breaths. Without a word, he pulled his canteen from his belt and offered it. The child hesitated for a moment, then reached out with trembling hands and drank deeply, water spilling down the chin and onto the dusty ground. Marcus waited patiently, noting the desperate way those small fingers gripped the metal like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Where's your family?" he asked gently, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The child's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then in a voice barely above a whisper came the words, "Gone. All gone." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding flooding through him like water through a broken dam. He had seen this before: raids, massacres, children left behind to die in the desert. The endless cycle of violence that seemed to consume everything in its path. Without thinking, Marcus reached up and took off his hat, a well-worn Stetson that had seen him through countless storms and blazing days. It was the color of aged leather, sweat-stained and shaped by years of sun and wind, with a braided leather hatband that his brother Tommy had made for him during a quiet moment between battles. He placed it gently on the child's head, where it settled like a crown, far too large, but somehow perfect in its imperfection. The wide brim cast blessed shade over the small face. "There," he said softly, "that'll keep the sun off your face." The child touched the brim of the hat with wonder, as if it were made of gold instead of felt and leather. For the first time, those dark eyes showed something other than fear, a flicker of hope. "Come on," he said, extending his hand. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The child took his hand without hesitation, and together they walked back to where the sorrel waited. Marcus lifted the small body onto the saddle, settling the child in front of him, and they rode away from that place of abandonment toward whatever lay ahead. They traveled for hours through the shifting landscape of the high desert. The child said nothing, but Marcus could feel the small body relaxing against his chest as they put distance between themselves and whatever horror had taken place. "You got a name?" he asked as they paused in the shade of a towering outcrop. The child was quiet for so long that Marcus thought the question wouldn't be answered. Then, in that same whisper-soft voice, "Ayana." "Ayana," Marcus repeated. "That's a pretty name. What's it mean?" "Eternal blossom," came the reply. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus spotted what he was looking for, a thin column of smoke rising from a hidden valley. He urged the horse toward it, following a game trail that wound down into a secluded canyon where cottonwoods grew thick along a seasonal stream. The camp was small, perhaps 20 people, their lodges arranged in a loose circle around a central fire. They were Navajo, Marcus could tell from their dress. They looked up as he approached, hands moving instinctively to weapons, but their faces showed more curiosity than hostility. An elderly man stepped forward, his silver hair braided with leather and beads, his weathered face marked with dignity. He spoke in rapid Navajo to Ayana, who responded in what sounded like a mixture of languages. She gestured toward Marcus repeatedly, and he caught the word for hat in her speech. The old man's eyes widened as he listened, and he looked up at Marcus with something that might have been recognition. "You are the one," the old man said in careful English, "the one who gives gifts to lost children." Marcus frowned, confused. "I don't understand." The old man smiled. "This child, she is of the Diné through her father's line, but also granddaughter to a chief of the Chiricahua Apache through her mother's blood. You have done a great thing, giving kindness to one who was lost." "I just gave her my hat," Marcus said. "Anyone would have done the same." But the old man shook his head. "No, not anyone. Many would have ridden past, would have seen only a dying Apache child, and thought it was not their concern. You stopped. You gave water, shelter, hope. These things matter more than you know. I am called Joseph Begay," the old man continued. "You are welcome at our fire." That night, Marcus was invited to share the meal and the warmth of the central fire. The Navajo were traveling north to join relatives near the Colorado River. Ayana stayed close to Marcus throughout the evening, still wearing his hat, translating quietly for him as the others told stories around the fire. "She has no family left," Joseph explained quietly. "Her Apache relatives were killed in a raid 3 moons ago. Her Navajo kin are far to the north, if they still live. She has been alone, wandering, for many days before you found her." "What will happen to her?" Marcus asked. "She will come with us. We will find a place for her among the people. She will grow up knowing kindness instead of cruelty." When it came time to part the next morning, Ayana tried to give him back his hat, but Marcus shook his head. "You keep it. It looks better on you than it ever did on me." She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it was like watching the sun rise over the desert. She said something in Apache, and Joseph translated. "She says she will remember you always, the man who gave her the sun hat when she was lost in the darkness." Marcus rode away from that camp with a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The encounter had lasted less than 24 hours, but it had changed something in him, had reminded him of why he had once believed in the goodness of people. The next morning brought visitors. Marcus woke to the sound of many horses, the soft whisper of unshod hooves on stone and sand. He sat up slowly, his hand moving to his rifle, and peered out to see them coming, a long line of riders emerging from the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts made flesh. They were Apache, that much was clear from their dress and the way they sat their horses. But there were so many of them, At least 300 warriors spread across the canyon floor like a living tapestry of feathers and war paint and polished steel. They moved with fluid grace, their horses making almost no sound on the rocky ground. The leader was a man in his 50s, tall and lean as a whip, with silver streaking his black hair and scars marking his weathered face. He wore a magnificent war bonnet that flowed down his back like a waterfall of eagle feathers, and his chest was painted with symbols that spoke of battles won and honors earned. He raised his hand as he approached, and the entire war party came to a halt with military precision. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on Marcus, and he felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. "You are the one called Marcus Hartwell," the chief said in perfect English, his voice carrying clearly across the still morning air. Marcus nodded, recognizing this man from army dispatches and territorial newspapers. Naiche, war chief of the Chiricahua Apache, son of the legendary Cochise, a man who had never been captured, never been defeated. "I am Naiche," the chief continued, "and you are the man who gave kindness to a lost child." "I just gave her my hat," Marcus said, finding his voice. "Nothing more." Naiche smiled, and it transformed his stern features into something almost gentle. "Nothing more," he says. "Brothers, did you hear? He gave nothing more than water to a dying child, nothing more than shelter to one who was lost, nothing more than hope to one who had none." A murmur ran through the assembled warriors, and Marcus realized with growing amazement that they were not here to fight. There was no hostility in their posture, no weapons drawn. They sat their horses with easy confidence, but they had come for a different purpose entirely. "The child you saved," Naiche continued, "is my brother's granddaughter. Her mother was my niece. For 3 moons we have searched for her, following cold trails and false signs, believing her dead. And then word came through the people, through the Navajo who shelter her, that a white man had found her dying in the desert and gave her not only his protection, but his own hat to shield her from the sun." Marcus felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes upon him, all looking at him with something that might have been respect, might have been gratitude. "Such kindness," Naiche said, "deserves to be recognized. In the old days, when a man showed great honor to the people showed honor in return." He gestured, and one of the warriors rode forward, leading a magnificent paint horse, its coat a patchwork of black and white that seemed to shift and flow in the morning light. The horse was clearly a prize, tall and strong, with intelligent eyes and proud bearing. Its saddle was decorated with beadwork that must have taken months to complete, and its bridle was adorned with silver conchos that caught the sun like mirrors. "This is Windrunner," Naiche said formally. "He is the finest horse in my herd, faster than the wind and braver than a cornered bear. He has carried me through 20 battles and never once faltered. He is yours, as a gift from the people to one who has shown that not all white men have forgotten what it means to be human." Marcus stared at the horse, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gesture. "I can't accept this. What I did, it wasn't anything special." Naiche's expression hardened slightly. "You speak of what any decent man would do, but we have seen what most men do when they find Apache children alone in the desert. They do not stop. They do not give water. They ride on, or worse. They see an opportunity to claim a bounty on a scalp, no matter how small." The chief's voice grew harder, edged with old pain. "We have buried too many of our children who were found too late, who died alone under the sun because no one would show them the kindness you showed to Ayana. Your gift was not small, white man. It was everything." Marcus felt something break open inside his chest. He thought of Ayana, of her small hands gripping his canteen, of the way she had looked at him with trust instead of fear. "What is her full name?" he asked quietly. Naiche's expression softened. "Ayana Tsega-i-Nae, eternal blossom who walks on white rocks." She was born during the season of the white flowers, when the desert blooms with life after the rains. Her grandmother said she would bring renewal to the people. And has she? She has brought you to us, Naicha said simply. And through you, she has shown us that not all bridges between our peoples have been burned. Marcus walked slowly toward the paint horse. The animal watched him approach with intelligent eyes, and when he reached out to touch its neck, the horse nuzzled his hand like an old friend. His name is Windrunner, Marcus asked. Among the people, yes, Naicha said. But you may call him whatever pleases you. He is yours now. Naicha nodded approvingly. There is more. Another warrior rode forward, carrying a rifle that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a Winchester, but not like any he had ever seen. The stock was carved with intricate patterns that seemed to flow like water, and the barrel was engraved with symbols that spoke of wind and storm and wild freedom. This belonged to my father, Naicha said reverently. Cochise carried it in his last battle against the Bluecoats. It has never missed its mark, has never failed in the moment of greatest need. It is a weapon worthy of a warrior, and you have shown yourself to be a warrior, though you fight with kindness instead of bullets. Marcus took the rifle with trembling hands. He could feel the history in the polished wood, the stories carved into every line and symbol. I don't know what to say, he said finally. Say you will remember, Naicha replied. Say you will remember that kindness is its own kind of courage, and that the people honor courage wherever it is found. The ceremony continued as the sun climbed higher. One by one, the warriors rode forward to offer their own gifts. A medicine pouch worked with porcupine quills, a knife with a bone handle carved in the shape of a soaring eagle, a blanket woven with colors that seemed to capture the sunset itself. Each gift came with words of respect, of gratitude, of recognition for what Marcus had done. They spoke of Ayana, of how she had described the white man who had saved her, who had given her his hat and asked nothing in return. She is well, Naicha said as the ceremony drew to a close. She stays with the Navajo, but she is still of the people. She grows strong and proud, and she will tell her children about the man who gave her his hat when she was lost in the darkness. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Will I see her again? Naicha's smile was enigmatic. The desert has its own ways of bringing people together when the time is right. Perhaps you will not, but she will carry you with her always as you will carry her. As the warriors prepared to leave, Naicha approached Marcus one final time. There is something else, he said quietly. A warning given in friendship. There are those among your people who would not understand what has happened here today. They would see only an Apache war party and a white man who has been marked by our favor. They would make trouble for you. Marcus nodded. He had thought of this already, had realized that accepting these gifts would mark him as different. I can handle trouble, he said. I believe you can, Naicha replied, but if the time comes when you need sanctuary, remember that you have friends among the people. The passes through the mountains are known to us, and there are places where a man can live free if he chooses. Thank you, Marcus said, and meant it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. Naicha mounted his horse, settling himself in the saddle with easy grace. Ayana asks that you remember her when you see the white flowers bloom in the desert, he said. She says they will remind you that even in the hardest ground, beauty can grow. And then they were gone, 300 warriors melting back into the desert as silently as they had come, leaving Marcus alone with his new horse and his new rifle, and a heart that felt both heavier and lighter than it had in years. As he saddled Windrunner and prepared to continue his journey, Marcus realized that something fundamental had changed in him. For years, he'd been drifting through life like a ghost, convinced that the world was too broken to be worth caring about. But Ayana had shown him something different, that even in the darkest times, human connection was possible. That kindness mattered, that small acts of decency could ripple outward in ways he had never imagined. The desert stretched out before him as he rode, vast and empty and beautiful in its harsh indifference, but now it seemed different somehow, touched with the possibility of connection, of understanding, of hope. Where once he had ridden aimlessly, Now he found himself drawn to places where he might do some good. Word of his kindness began to spread in the way that news travels in the desert, slowly but surely, carried by traders and travelers. Some of the stories were true, others were embellished, but all carried the same message. There was a man riding a paint horse who could be trusted, who would help without asking questions. It was 3 months after the ceremony when Marcus first saw the flowers. He was riding through a particularly desolate stretch of desert when he crested a small rise and found himself looking down into a hidden valley covered with thousands of white blooms, desert lupine, stretching as far as the eye could see. He dismounted and walked down into the valley, Windrunner following behind. The flowers were everywhere, their white petals catching the morning sunlight like tiny stars. The air was sweet with their perfume, and Marcus thought of Ayana, of her small face beneath the brim of his old hat. As he knelt among the flowers, he heard the sound of approaching horses. He stood slowly and turned to see a small group of riders emerging from the rocks, Apache, but not warriors. This was a family group, and leading them was a familiar figure. It was Ayana. She was taller now, her face filled out with healthy roundness. Her hair was neatly braided with colored ribbon, and she wore a dress that was beautifully decorated with beadwork. But most remarkably, she was still wearing his hat, now resized to fit her growing head. "Marcus!" she cried in clear English, launching herself into his arms. He swept her up, spinning her around among the white flowers, while she laughed with pure joy. "Look how you've grown," he said, setting her down and studying her face. The hollow cheeks were gone, replaced by the healthy glow of a child who was loved and well cared for. "I knew you would come," she said matter-of-factly. "Grandmother said the spirits would bring you to see the flowers bloom." The reunion that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The Apache families welcomed him as if he truly were a long-lost relative. They shared their food, their fire, their stories of the long months since he had last seen Ayana. "She tells everyone about you," explained Nalnish, the leader of the group. "About the white man who gave her his hat and asked for nothing in return. In these dark times, we need stories of hope." Ayana had grown more than just physically, Marcus realized. She moved with confidence, clearly beloved by everyone in the group. She had become something special, a bridge between worlds, just as nature had predicted. But their peaceful reunion was not to last. The families were traveling to surrender at the government agency, tired of running, tired of hiding. The choice was surrender or become permanent fugitives, hunted by the army. What if there was another choice? Marcus found himself saying. I know these mountains. I know trails that aren't on any army map, valleys where a small group could live without being found. The debate that followed was intense. Some wanted to accept his offer of sanctuary in the hidden places. Others feared living as outlaws forever. It was Ayana herself who finally broke the deadlock. "I have lived in 3 worlds," she said, speaking in both Apache and English. Apache, Navajo, and white. "I have seen the worst that people can do to each other, and I have seen the best. Marcus saved me when he could have ridden past. You have all loved me when you could have seen me as just another burden." She paused, looking around the circle of faces. "I think there are good people in all worlds, and bad people too. The question is whether we can trust this one white person, this Marcus, who has already proven his friendship." Her words carried weight that no adult argument could match. The decision was made. They would trust Marcus's judgment and follow him to a hidden valley he knew, where they could build a new life free from government control. The journey to their mountain refuge was challenging, leading 23 people through rugged country while avoiding cavalry patrols. But Windrunner proved his worth, carrying Marcus tirelessly while his keen senses warned of danger. Ayana proved invaluable as well, her quick mind and language skills helping them avoid detection. They reached their destination, a hidden canyon high in the mountains, where a year-round stream provided water and the surrounding peaks offered protection. It was a natural fortress that could only be reached by a single narrow trail, invisible from below. The work of building their new home began immediately. The Apache families brought generations of knowledge about living in harmony with the land, while Marcus contributed his understanding of white ways and his contacts among traders and prospectors. Together, they created something unique, a community that honored Apache traditions while adapting to their hidden existence. Ayana thrived in this new environment. She became the unofficial ambassador between their community and the outside world, accompanying Marcus on trading expeditions. Her presence made him less suspicious to other whites, while her quick wit made her an invaluable companion. Years passed, and their hidden community prospered. Ayana grew into a remarkable young woman, fluent in 3 languages, educated in both traditional and modern ways, beautiful in spirit and appearance. She became Marcus's assistant and eventual successor, taking over administrative duties as she proved her competence. On her 18th birthday, she finally returned Marcus's hat. "I don't need it anymore," she said with a smile that reminded him of the frightened child he had found in the desert. "I know who I am now, and I know that kindness is its own protection." Marcus took the old Stetson with trembling hands. It was more battered than ever, shaped by years of wear and the love of a child who had treasured it as a symbol of hope. But it was still recognizably the same hat that had begun their journey together. As he looked at Ayana, confident, educated, proud of her heritage, and secure in her place in the world, Marcus realized that the cycle was complete. The frightened child he had saved had grown into the kind of person who could save others. The kindness he had shown had rippled outward, creating new possibilities, new bridges, new hope. The desert still stretched beyond their valley, vast and unforgiving and beautiful, but it no longer seemed empty to Marcus. It was full of connections, full of the possibility that somewhere out there, other lost souls were finding their way home. Other bridges were being built between enemies who had forgotten their common humanity. The hat sat on his shelf now, a reminder of where their journey had begun and how far they had traveled together. But more than that, it was a symbol of what was possible when people chose compassion over cruelty, understanding over hatred, hope over despair. In the end, that was the greatest gift of all, not the ceremony or the honors, but the knowledge that one moment of kindness had created ripples that would continue long after he was gone, carried forward by a young woman who had learned that bridges could be built even across the deepest chasms of misunderstanding and fear.